I want to bring in today's power panel. We have Congressman Nadler of New York, Jackie Hilley, Executive Director of New Yorkers Against Gun Violence, and Ezra Klein, MSNBC policy analyst and Washington Post columnist. Jackie, I want to start with you because last night was the fourth time that we as a country have watched this president have to address a national tragedy like this. And I want to remind everybody of the last three times that we have seen the president take to a mic to comfort the country.
It may be hard to comprehend the twisted logic that led to this tragedy, but this much we do know. No faith justifies these murderous and craven acts.
This tragedy prompts reflection and debate, as it should. Let's make sure it's worthy of those we have lost.
I hope that over the next several days, next several weeks, and next several months, we all reflect on how we can do something about some of the senseless violence.
Can we recognize the president's words last night that enough is enough and that something will come out of this? Because right now, the country is in need of something stronger and some resolve, as we just point out with the state senator there, McKinney.
I think the Senator McKinney was really saying what's on the mind of all people in our country at this point. And I think the president put it very aptly into words last night. Can we honestly say we're doing enough in this country to keep all of our children safe? And I think clearly the answer in the country is no, we're not. If something like this happens in our midst and we're standing on the sidelines, it's imperative on our part to do something about it.
Congressman, I do want to remind everybody exactly what the president said last night, the strong words that he used while consoling the country and the people of Newtown, but basically calling this country to action. Take a listen.
No single law, no set of laws can eliminate evil from the world or prevent every senseless act of violence in our society. But that can't be an excuse for inaction. Surely we can do better than this. Surely we can do better than this. Sir, 7 members of Congress from both chambers have now called for action. Senator Dianne Feinstein appearing on Meet the Press saying she wants to introduce assault weapons ban legislation on the first day of the new Congress. The phrase tipping point has been used a lot in connection with the Newtown tragedy. Is this really a tipping point? Can we expect something better out of our elected leaders like yourself come next year?
I hope so, but we won't know until the facts prove it. Every time there's a tragedy like this, people engage in similar rhetoric, although I think the president's statements were very strong. I fully expect the president in early January to come out and recommend and put the weight of his office behind some strong gun control legislation. And we've used any number of political excuses for these years. People have been afraid of the leadership of the NRA, who really have to be characterized at this point as enablers of mass murder, and will continue to be so if they continue to oppose reasonable restrictions on gun violence. On Friday, the same day as the tragedy that occurred in Newtown, a maniac attacked an elementary school in China with a knife. He wounded 22 children, but they all lived. They'll all come home. The difference here is that the maniac had a gun and 26 people are dead. In China, he had a knife. 22 children were wounded, but they're all going to be okay. It is our fault if we continue to let this insanity reign in this country. We know what to do about it. We have death by gun rates 15, 20 times that of any other industrialized country, and we know exactly why. We have to stop this.
Ezra, when we talk about this, there's a new Chicago Trib editorial out by Dick Durbin today talking about basically the big question of what will it take, and he talks about what holds us back are political organizations that are well-funded, well-organized, and determined to resist even reasonable limitations. There is a close political parallel between the gridlock in Washington on dealing with our economy and national debt and the eerie silence in Congress as the list of horrific gun crimes grows by the day. An obvious big reference there to the NRA. There were no supported senators of the NRA that would go on Meet the Press this weekend. The NRA has been oddly mum in this, telling NBC News that they want to wait to remark on this until more facts come to light. But as you pointed out in a recent editorial and a write-up yourself, as we look back on the assault weapons ban between 1994 and 2004, we saw such a decrease in the amount of gun crimes in this country, yet we let that lapse. and we got away from it. How easy is it going to be to utilize what is coming out, the knowledge that's coming out of this tragedy in Newtown, to revisit that and get something done?
I would never say doing anything in Washington is easy at all. Look, we are going to have to do something. I'm not a huge fan, actually, of the assault weapons ban, and this gets to something broader, I think, that needs to be talked about. We need to do something. We need action. You keep hearing that. We also need to do the right thing. We need things that will actually help. The assault weapons ban, I don't think the evidence is very good, actually, that it did much to curb gun violence during its tenure. I'm not saying it wasn't a step in the right direction, but it was rife with loopholes. It was shot through with ways to get around it. It grandfathered everything in. So one thing that has happened, particularly in the last 10 years, as in particular Democrats have begun to believe that the NRA is all-powerful, is that a lot of the thinking on gun control has simply stagnated. There hasn't been a lot of new, fresh thinking and not enough integration of new, important research into what we can do. So as we get into this conversation, one hope that I have, at least, is that we have enough time for it, or we make enough time for it, or we make enough space for it, that we figure out how to do a better job on this, and we did, frankly, in the 90s, and frankly, and such that it actually will have not just an effect on things like the mass spree shootings we've been seeing recently, but on the more than 12,000 gun homicides a year, the more than 18,000 gun suicides a year, the more than 600 or about 600 inadvertent gun deaths a year, and the 66,000 gun injuries. Spree shootings are really not the only problem here, although they are the most epically horrific.
So, Congressman, as Ezra brings up, when we use the example of the assault weapons ban, maybe it wasn't the greatest piece of legislation because of all the loopholes that it had in it, but a step in the right direction. Here we are nearly 10 years later after it lapses, and there are 10 gun legislation bills before Congress that lawmakers could act on immediately. Among them, the Fix Gun Checks Acts of 2011 and the Preventing Gun Violence Act, on which right now there are these 8 other ones that I'm not going to go over, but we could see Congress act on it. And meanwhile, it's coming up on the 2-year anniversary of your colleague, Gabrielle Giffords, nearly being assassinated by doing a Congress on your corner at a supermarket in Arizona. So when one of your own is nearly assassinated, yet Congress does nothing, how are we to think as Americans that something will get done now using this latest tragedy as the catalyst?
Well, I don't know that we should think that anything is going to happen now. We have to make it happen. Congress is not going to act unless the president and the people push it very strongly. In the past election, and I don't think too many political people are aware of this, the NRA proved to be pretty much of a paper tiger. Most of the candidates they supported lost. Most of the candidates they opposed won. That information has to get out there. But we have to put real pressure on our members of Congress, who many of whom will do whatever is the easiest thing in their districts. And they may be afraid of primary fights or general elections. We have to say enough is enough. The president's got to lead, and those of us who can have to speak out, as I am doing now. There is, and the fact that one rather mild gun control measure didn't solve the problem is no excuse. We know a lot of things to do. We know the fact that a country like Germany has 158 gun deaths a year, and we have 9 to 10,000 a year. We know what has to be done. You have to. I mean, if we could really do what we should do, I would make it a crime to possess. After a period of buybacks, a crime to possess an assault rifle or a high-capacity magazine, as it is a crime to possess drugs. They're certainly more harmful than drugs. That's not likely to happen, but the least we can do is to ban the sale of assault weapons, ban the sale of high ammunition clips, get rid of the gun show loophole under which anyone can buy a gun or anything on site at a gun show, ban gun trafficking, that is, limit sale of guns to 1 a month or something, so that you can't go to Virginia, buy 40 weapons and ship it illegally into New York, where you have stronger gun control laws. These are things we can do, we know to do, and that we know will greatly reduce the number of innocent people killed every year. They won't eliminate it, but they will greatly reduce it. And I was struck by the fact that everybody's going to investigate Adam Lanza and so forth. We know what Adam Lanza was. He had a mental problem. There are people in this country who are going to have mental problems. We don't know how to stop that. We do know how to disarm them.
Congressman, thanks so much, Chang.